The Pontiac GTO is an icon in the automotive industry. Released in the 1960s, the GTO did not just change the automotive space, but it set a legacy for a generation. Popularly known for being the pioneer of the muscle car revolution, this powerhouse combined performance and style. In the early 1960s, most consumers just wanted something affordable, but some consumers were willing to spend more money on something that was fast, powerful, and had a sporty look. The muscle car movement was on the rise, which pressured automakers, making most automakers focus on vehicles that were powerful and looked aggressive. As a result of this revolution, cars like the Ford Mustang quickly gained fame among car lovers. Released in 1964, the Mustang was an instant success because it was a new model of performance cars that were accessible to the masses. However, the Chevrolet Corvette continued to be the American performance car of choice, but this was about to change. Looking beyond the pony cars, another unique model was a Shelby Cobra. This vehicle, built with a lightweight design and a V8 engine, became the car of choice among car enthusiasts, ultimately raising the bar for what a sports car could really achieve. Although the Shelby Cobra was created for the luxury market, it was contributed to the increase in demand for high-performance vehicles. The Pontiac GTO was founded through innovation, ambition, and a little rebellion. In the early 1960s, General Motors executives were trying to push for a corporate strategy that made most of their vehicles low performance, probably to reduce the cost of production and maximize profits. Around that time, there was a corporate law that restricted mid-size cars to engines not bigger than 330 cubic inches, which placed a handicap on General Motors, preventing involvement in motorsport. However, John DeLorean, the leader of Pontiac, did not agree with this and thought of a plan to break free from the corporate hold and attract younger buyers looking for speed and power with a low budget. DeLorean and his team members, like Jim Wagner's, took advantage of the opportunity to make General Motors have more exciting cars. The Pontiac was proposed to have something different from the norm. The idea was to take a regular car like the Pontiac Tempest and turn it into a high-performance vehicle without unnecessary alterations. This way, it would be affordable for the masses. In 1964, their efforts yielded results and the Pontiac GTO was founded. It was not just another minor upgrade with the hopes of money grab. It represented a huge change in terms of performance. The reason for the GTO's success was a bold approach. Pontiac decided to replace the previous engine with a 389 cubic inch V8 engine, which was quite different from the regular engines in most cars at the time. But the 325 horsepower engine was not all the car could offer. Further developments to the car included a tuned suspension, dual exhaust to improve the sound quality and make the car sound more aggressive, a Hurst shifter for a more responsive driving experience, and wider wheels. But the GTO was not just raw power. It had almost perfect handling during the driving experience. The engineers carefully tuned the car's suspension, which balanced the car's power with stability. The Pontiac had better handling than many of its competitors like the Polara and the Chevelle, which were not designed with performance driving in mind. The Pontiac's tighter suspension, responsive steering, and improved braking made the streets easily maneuverable, making the car engaging to drive. Pontiac's marketing strategy for the GTO was just as incredible as the car itself. Instead of targeting their regular audience, which comprised of the older people who might have preferred luxurious or family-oriented cars, the younger audience was targeted, and the car was made specifically for a rebellious crowd. The GTO was marketed using slogans like "The Great One" and "This is the GTO," taking advantage of the younger generation's desire for freedom, power, and status. Pontiac understood that the younger buyers wanted a car that was more than just transporting oneself from one point to another. With time, the GTO started gaining popularity among street racing lovers, and young men wanted to show off their new cars and challenge each other on the streets, making the GTO the perfect fit for this environment. Pontiac marketing played a huge role in this by featuring the GTO in advertisements that were inspired by street racing, showing its ability to dominate both in drag races and sprint races. These marketing strategies made the GTO to be seen as a cool car that was important in creating a following among the youth of the 1960s, leading to a strong fan base that will continue to celebrate the legacy of the GTO for decades to come. The success of the GTO affected how its competitors produced their cars. The GTO was able to prove that performance did not have to be expensive, and because it was a successful concept, its competitors like the Chevrolet Camaro and the Ford Mustang started to model their vehicles in the same way so they could keep up their sales. The Ford Mustang's debut in 1964 offered a wide range of options from the regular 6-cylinder models to a more powerful V8 versions, making it accessible to the broad audience despite the age range. But it was the V8 powered variants, especially the GT model, that helped Mustang to be recognized as a legitimate performance contender when compared with the Pontiac GTO. Although the GTO offered raw horsepower with its V8 engine, the Mustang was more about youthful exuberance. What made the Mustang very significant in the muscle car movement was the way the Mustang was able to combine speed and style. It was built with a long hood and aggressive stance, giving it the iconic mean look. The Chevrolet Impala SS, particularly the Super Sport variant, was a full-size car with an appeal of a muscle car. Even though it did not fit the traditional definition of a muscle car despite being bigger and heavier than the Pontiac GTO, it still represented Chevrolet's entry into performance cars that catered to a growing audience that wanted luxury and power in a single vehicle. Launched in 1961, the Impala SS was equipped with a powerful engine, including the 409 cubic inch V8, which had a horsepower of 409. The 409 engine became popular in the performance world, especially after it was mentioned in the famous song Little Deuce Coupe from the Beach Boys. While the Impala SS was not as quick as a smaller, sportier GTO, it offered speed, performance, raw power, and a level of luxury that made it stand out as well. For buyers who wanted a combination of a performance car with the practicality of a full-size sedan, the Impala SS provided a perfect balance. It was a type of car you could take on a long road trip and burn rubber on the drag strip when you're in the mood. The Plymouth Barracuda, introduced in 1964, is considered one of the closest competitors to the GTO, although it had a slightly different approach. While the GTO was all about raw performance with a large V8 engine, the Barracuda targeted buyers that wanted a unique combination of power and style, which was slightly similar to the other supercars at the time. It was one of the first cars to come with a fastback design, which gave it an aerodynamic shape, a lot different from its competitors. The Plymouth Barracuda fell short in some areas compared to the Pontiac GTO. The early models of the Plymouth had smaller engines, but in 1967, Plymouth introduced a higher performance version, the Formula S, featuring a 273 cubic inch V8 and more aggressive styling. The most famous muscle cars came in 1970 when Plymouth introduced the Cuda, a high-performance version that included the famous Hemi engine. The car was visually striking, which gave it a strong reputation for being a car that was fun to drive. As each of these cars drew the attention of performance enthusiasts across the country, they set the stage for the muscle car dominance that would follow in years to come. The Pontiac GTO's influence did not end in 1964. Between 1965 and 1970, the GTO was modified to have performance upgrades with more powerful engines. In 1965, the GTO was built with a new body style and options like the Tri-Power carburetor, which significantly improved the horsepower. The 1969 and 1970 models featured an even broader design, with more powerful engines, but in the early 1970s, the muscle car era started to decline. With the introduction of stricter emissions regulations and the 1973 fuel crisis, there was a decline in demand and high-performance vehicles, and the production of the GTO was severely affected. The 1974 model was the GTO's last run before it was discontinued. Pontiac decided to shift the model to the smaller Ventura, which was based on the Chevy Nova. This smaller version of the Pontiac came with a 350 cubic inch V8 that had 200 horsepower and 295 foot-pounds of torque. The performance was a lot worse than the previous versions, and the increasingly strict regulations nearly buried the brand forever. A few years later, Pontiac unveiled a GTO concept car at the auto show in Detroit, rekindling the people's interest in the legacy brand. In 2004, the GTO was brought to life, but the design was altered with GM's inspiration drawn from GM's Australian Holden division. The Holden Monaro was modified as the Pontiac GTO for the United States market with a 5.7-liter LS1 V8 engine and a 350 horsepower. It got upgraded a year later with a 6.0-liter LS2 V8 engine and an improved horsepower of 400. Despite the incredible performance and the growl of its V8 engine, the modified GTO struggled to find its footing. The Pontiac had been listed for $25,000, but because of exchange rates, the cost eventually went as high as $35,000. The combination of its criticism and the increase in price made it difficult to sell, and in 2006, the production of the GTO was brought to an end. But the GTO built a legacy as the original muscle car. It set a standard for performance and style that influenced generations of car enthusiasts, changing the automotive world forever. The GTO's influence continues today, with modern muscle cars carrying the torch of power, performance, and style.